Please help my mom. Can you save her?" The little boy's voice trembled as he looked up at the most powerful billionaire in the room, the same man who had no idea the child standing before him was his own son. The boy's small hand clutched the edge of the hospital table as he repeated the words again, his wide eyes fixed on the tall man across the room. "Please help my mom. Can you save her?" The room had fallen strangely quiet. Doctors stood still. Nurses stopped writing. Even the billionaire, a man who built empires and moved markets with a single decision, seemed frozen for the first time in his life. His name was Adrian Hale, a man whose wealth filled news headlines and whose influence reached across cities and governments. Yet in that moment, standing under the pale hospital lights, he looked less like a titan of business and more like a man who had just stepped into a story he did not understand. Because the woman lying in the hospital bed beside the boy was someone he had once loved deeply, and the child looking up at him carried the same calm eyes he saw in the mirror every morning. The little boy did not know who Adrian truly was. To him, Adrian was simply the richest man in the city, the only man people whispered could fix anything. And tonight, a 4-year-old had come to ask him for the one thing money could not always guarantee: time. 4 years earlier, far from the bright towers of Adrian Hale's world, a quiet woman named Elena Cruz had stood alone on a cold winter morning, holding a newborn wrapped in a soft blue blanket. The air smelled of rain and old pavement. Cars rushed by on the busy street, their noise blending with the distant hum of the city waking up. Elena had once been a nurse at a private hospital where powerful people came and went quietly. She had gentle hands and a calm voice that made frightened patients breathe easier. But life had taken a sharp turn when she discovered she was carrying a child Adrian Hale had never known. Their brief love had ended before either of them understood how deeply their lives had already intertwined. Elena had made a choice that required quiet courage. She would raise the child alone, not out of anger, not out of pride, but because she believed the boy deserved a life, free from the storms that followed powerful men. She named him Mateo. The baby had dark hair and curious eyes that watched everything. Nights were long. Elena worked extra hospital shifts, sometimes rocking Mateo to sleep in the break room between emergencies. The scent of antiseptic and coffee filled those quiet hours. She would whisper soft promises while holding his tiny fingers. She promised him safety. She promised him love. She promised him that even without a father, he would never feel alone. Years passed in small but meaningful moments. Mateo grew into a cheerful child who laughed easily and asked endless questions about the world. Their small apartment was simple but warm. Sunlight spilled through the windows each morning, painting soft patterns across the floor where Mateo lined up his toy cars. Elena's life was a balance of exhaustion and quiet joy. She packed lunches, read bedtime stories, and kissed scraped knees after playground adventures. But deep inside her heart lived a secret she carried alone. Sometimes late at night, when Mateo slept beside his stuffed bear, she would scroll past headlines about Adrian Hale, photos of him attending global meetings, photos of him shaking hands with leaders. The father Mateo had never met. She never spoke his name out loud. Elena believed some truths were too heavy for a child. Yet fate had its own way of weaving hidden threads together. One evening, during a severe storm, Elena collapsed at work. The hospital corridors smelled sharp and sterile as doctors rushed around her. Tests revealed a serious illness that had been growing quietly inside her body. The news spread among staff in worried whispers. Elena's strength had always been her shield, but now time had become her greatest enemy. Mateo did not understand illness the way adults did. To him, the hospital was simply the place where his mother helped people feel better. So when Elena was moved from the nurse's station to a patient bed, his small world tilted in confusion. He watched doctors speak in low voices. He noticed the tired look in their eyes. Children feel tension even when words remain gentle. Mateo sensed something was wrong. During those long hospital days, he wandered through bright corridors holding a drawing he had made for his mother. It showed a tall stick-figure hero standing beside a smaller one. At the bottom of the page were the words he had carefully sounded out with crayons. A hero saves people. One afternoon, he overheard two nurses speaking softly near the elevator. They spoke about Adrian Hale, the hospital's largest donor, the man whose foundation funded entire wings of the building, the richest man in the city. Mateo listened with the quiet attention only children have. In his mind, the solution became simple. If this man helped everyone, then surely he could help his mom too. So with the brave certainty of a child who believes the world is kind, Matteo followed the nurse's directions until he reached a private meeting room where Adrian Hale had come to inspect a new medical program. When Matteo pushed open the door, no one expected the moment that followed. The room was filled with polished shoes and tailored suits. Advisors stood beside digital screens explaining plans worth millions. Adrian listened with calm authority, his posture strong, his expression steady. Yet when the small boy walked forward, clutching his crayon drawing, something shifted in the air. "Please help my mom. Can you save her?" The words were soft, but carried a weight that silenced the room. Adrian looked down at the child, noticing details others missed. The boy's eyes, the familiar shape of his smile, the strange pull of recognition that brushed against Adrian's thoughts like a memory trying to wake. Matteo held out the drawing. "A hero saves people," he explained with simple hope. Around them, executives exchanged uncertain glances. Security staff stepped closer, but Adrian raised his hand gently. In that moment, the powerful billionaire did something rare. He knelt down to meet the child at eye level. His voice was quiet but steady as he asked about the boy's mother. When Matteo pointed toward the hospital wing, where Alina lay fighting for breath, Adrian felt an unfamiliar tightness in his chest. Something deep inside him had already begun connecting invisible dots. The power shift arrived, not with anger or dramatic speeches, but through quiet truth unfolding piece by piece. Adrian walked with Matteo through the hospital halls, leaving his advisors behind. Doctors explained Elena's condition carefully. The air carried the scent of disinfectant and worry. As Adrian entered Elena's room, time seemed to pause. Alina opened her eyes slowly, and recognition flickered across her face like a memory returning after years of silence. In that fragile moment, the past stood between them. 4 years of secrets, 4 years of sacrifice. Adrian understood everything without needing long explanations. The boy who held his hand so trustingly was his son, and the woman who had protected that child with quiet strength had done so without asking him for anything. Adrian's voice remained calm, but carried a depth that surprised even himself. A promise spoken not for pride, but for responsibility. A man's true power is measured by who he chooses to protect when no one is watching. The words spread through the hospital staff like a ripple of respect. Specialists were called, treatments were arranged. The vast network Adrian had built through years of leadership moved into action not for profit, but for one woman who had once carried his future quietly in her arms. Days later, sunlight returned to Elena's hospital room. Matteo sat beside her bed, holding her hand while Adrian stood near the window watching the city skyline. Elena's recovery had begun slowly but steadily, thanks to the rare treatment Adrian's team had secured. The tension that once filled the hospital halls had softened into relief. Nurses who once whispered now smiled when Matteo passed by. The little boy had become a symbol of courage without even knowing it. Adrian visited often, sometimes bringing simple toys, sometimes just sitting quietly, while Matteo told long stories about school and dinosaurs. Wealth had given Adrian influence, but this moment taught him something deeper. True strength is not the power to control the world. It is the courage to stand beside the people who need you most. Alina watched father and son from her bed with gentle gratitude in her eyes. For the first time in years, the future no longer felt uncertain. Some stories remind us that heroes do not always arrive with loud entrances. Sometimes they peer through the quiet bravery of a child asking a simple question. Matteo had believed in kindness without knowing the weight of the truth he carried, and that belief changed everything. Across the hospital, staff remembered the moment the powerful billionaire knelt before a 4-year-old and chose compassion over pride. It became a quiet legend among them, a reminder that behind every strong person is often a silent story no one sees. If this story moved you, share where you are watching from and tell us what moment touched you the most. And if you believe that kindness and quiet courage still shape the world, subscribe for more stories that honor the strength of everyday heroes.